are now joined by one of the co-hosts of McElroy and Cubelic, an analyst for SEC Network and ESPN in their college football department, Cole Cubelic. Welcome to the Hard Count.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be with you today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, fired up to have you on. We got the Auburn helmet right over my shoulder just for you. So I hope it feels a little more like home for you. But no, man, we're excited to have you on.
I don't know if you're Croatian, but I got the Croatian flag here for you. So
yeah, it's a good guess. It's a good guess. I'm actually 100% American, but I appreciate the the nod there. Our Croatian audience really appreciates that, I'm sure. But Cole, I wanted to jump right into it. You played at Auburn. You were a captain at Auburn. You're very much so familiar with the inner workings going on there. What were your thoughts when you heard the news of everything that happened this past offseason with Bryan Harsin?
Yeah, it was first and foremost disappointing just because the last thing you want to see is the team that you love, the team that you support, the team that you put so much into, the school and the administration essentially cannibalize itself. Now, it could be one person, it could be 1,000 people. At that point, it really didn't matter because of how public it became. So it was hard to take, hard to like, hard. It was a tough pill to swallow, to be honest with you. And then, obviously, I had the advantage of being able to talk to some people around it that were close to it. And McElroy and I obviously covered it, and we took different stances on different things. There were parts of it that we weren't going to talk about publicly because, quite frankly, they hadn't been reported on. And no one had substantiated anything that some people were actually running with and saying that they just thought was true. I thought a lot of it was bogus, to be honest with you. I thought there was a guy behind a lot of it that just, for whatever reason, didn't like Bryan Harsin, thought Bryan Harsin should be out, wanted another coach, whether that was, he didn't have a southern drawl, or, he didn't come have brunch with him after games, or didn't have cigar and whiskeys with him on the weekends. I don't know what it was, but to think about the fact that somebody wanted to do that, when you also have to understand, on the other hand, how much that's going to set your program back if it actually did take place, was just something that I really couldn't fathom, couldn't process, to be perfectly honest with you. So a lot of it was gross. A lot of it was disappointing. And once again, we think about where we are in college football right now with the transfer portal, with how different teams in different states can recruit. I mean, you have laws in one state, and your neighboring state could have totally different laws as to how NIL operates for high school kids, and could give you massive advantages in recruiting. And you're going to take something and put it right in front of everyone that allowed so many different coaches, so many different people to go negatively recruit against Auburn, who had a new coaching staff and was already having their own troubles recruiting. So just bad ball, man. That's the only way that I know how to describe it. It was disappointing. It was disheartening for me and a lot of my former teammates and a lot of the guys that I know that played at Auburn, that love Auburn. And hopefully a lot of that's now behind them. And I think the team has been able to rally around it a little bit and sort of use that as motivation moving forward.
And that's sort of the next question is, where do you go from here if you're Auburn? Because in some respect, no matter how many games, they do or don't win this upcoming year, the question I have from a recruit is, okay, is he going to be here 2 years from now? What's the right next move if you're Auburn in this case?
Well, I think the next right move is to hopefully find some sustainability and some success with Bryan Harsin. He made some staff adjustments, and whether that was he didn't get along with them, they didn't like him, it just didn't fit, whatever that was, you hope that that's been corrected, and now he has a little bit more confidence with the guys around him that they're going to be able to build and they're going to be able to move forward and put together a quality product on the field. I don't think that there is any right step for anyone hoping that this doesn't go well or this fails or come get a new head coach, because just like I do, JD, that you're hitting the reset button then. And, yeah, sure, Valzon came in 2013. They go to the BCS championship game. I mean, that's literally a winning lottery ticket. It just does not happen very often where guys come in and have that kind of success year one. So I think also where the roster currently is and where recruiting currently is, you're putting yourself even that much further behind everybody else in the league. And let's just call it what it is. In the state of Alabama, you're a little bit behind the eight ball with how you can recruit, with how it pertains to name, image, and likeness. So I think the best foot forward, the best way for things to sort of correct themselves and the best opportunity for Auburn moving ahead is for Coach Harsin and his staff to find some success this year, put together a good season, whether that's 8-9 wins, and pretty much just show on the field that things are progressing, that things are going in the right direction. Like, I don't think you always have to win a game, and I'm not saying that losing is ever satisfactory, but you don't always have to win a game to show that things are heading in the right direction. Obviously, as you know, having played college football, you lose by 28, you lose by 2. Those are two totally different circumstances. And so I think show improvement, show that the team's behind you, that the kids are playing hard for you, go out and win a couple games, and then you begin to build on that next year, the year after, the year after. So I think putting a quality team on the field this year, finding a way to get above 500, maybe grab a few extra wins. If you can get one or two that people don't anticipate that you can get, be it Penn State, Georgia, Bama, whatever, then I think that's just that much better. So to me, that's the only way that you're going to look at finding, I guess, success in the near future if you're an Auburn fan.
And is there a win total? I mean, I think a lot of us have been very vocal about, hey, I think Bryan Harsin has the right stuff for Auburn. Seems like the leash is probably entirely too short than what is, he's ultimately earned. Is there a win total in your mind that he needs to get to feel comfortable about having that job moving forward?
I'll just say I think he's got to be above 500, and that seems fairly apparent. But I hate playing the game of 7, 9, 8, whatever that is, because kind of like I was describing previously, we don't know exactly how that looks. So if somebody said, all right, Bryan Harsin's got to win 8 games, and if he doesn't, he's fired, and the team gets hot late and their 7th win is against Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium, are you firing that guy? Like, I don't see how that really plays out. If there was an injury in the middle of the season that maybe went a long way towards costing you 2 games and that kept you from getting to 9 and the number is 9 and you get 8, are you really going to pull the trigger on that coach? So I think it's always a difficult game to play. It's always a complicated game to play. I think if Harsin's in the 7-8 win range, and like I said before, the team looks like it's building, looks like things are heading in the right direction, I think he'll be fine.
And it's easy to look at the offseason happenings and say, oh, man, Auburn as a program is taking steps backwards, whatever it may be. A lot of people forget they were 6-2 heading into November, and they had Alabama on the ropes if Tank Bigsby goes down in bounds. I mean, how overblown is this from a national perspective in terms of Auburn's perception?
I don't know how much is overblown, JD, because you still had a pretty significant losing streak to close out the season. And that can never be acceptable. You can't ever look at that and say, oh, that's cool. At the midseason point, you had things heading in the right direction. But I think you bring up a good point in that there were some real positives that had been completely forgotten. That Arkansas team was rolling when Auburn went to Fayetteville and absolutely blew that team out. You mentioned being able to play Alabama tight. You had a solid first half against Georgia, played them tight. Not a lot of teams could say that last season as far as how their schedule went all the way from top to bottom. So you also lost your quarterback late in the season and had to put your backup in to sort of finish the season, even though he had an SEC experience. That's just not something that's ever going to be better than it previously was. So that, on top of some other injuries that I think were pretty costly, you do forget some of the positive takeaways that took place last season. So I think that dark cloud that looms has more to do with what happened in the offseason and the fact that regardless of how close they were or how competitive they were, you lost multiple games in a row down the stretch, and that's not going to give you motivation heading into the next season. So I think the team has gone out of their way to find different motion and try to re-rally around some of the things that took place in February and March and try to use that to build heading into this season. But some of the negativity is deserved because they didn't finish the season strong. Yeah, you were competitive against Bama, but you still lost the game, and you were at home, and you had a couple other games that maybe you had a chance to win, specifically the bowl game that you couldn't find a way to get that done either.
And it felt like maybe that was kind of the ammunition or all the ammunition they needed to sort of stage that coup, more or less. We won't touch on that too much more, but they are going to eventually play football games this fall. Bryan Harsin will be the head coach. You touched on the quarterback spot. Zach Calzada transferring from A&M. Is it his job to lose? What's the status right now as it pertains to the quarterback spot?
If you're going to label it that way, I would reverse it. I think it's TJ Finley's job to lose right now, mainly because he finished the season as the starter last year, and Calzada had shoulder surgery, so he didn't get a ton of reps with the ones in spring ball. Matter of fact, anything that was live, which we know quarterbacks still aren't live, but perceived to be live, and even a lot of the 7-on-7 stuff, TJ got the number 1 reps. that can go miles for a young man that's trying to win a job or just trying to grow and improve and develop. And I still think there's development left in TJ Finley. People forget that when he got to LSU, that was in a COVID year. So everybody's learning via Zoom. All your meetings are via Zoom. You don't have a lot of face-to-face interaction with your coaches. And he's buried on the depth chart when and all of a sudden thrust into being a starter game 5 or whatever it was, and he's got to try and figure it out. Well, then he transfers to Auburn. That hits the reset button to a certain extent. New system, new coaches, new fundamentals. And I just think he hasn't had a lot of time to just be the guy and develop. Well, he got that in the spring. So maybe he's made big strides. I had the spring game and I was able to be next to him, talk to Coach Harsin. I did see some growth in TJ Finley. Now, I still think Zach Calzada is more capable and gives Auburn the ability to do more with what he offers in his right arm. So I think eventually he wins the job. But as of right now, I still think Zach's got to go take it from TJ if he's going to be the starter game 1 and be the starter for the entire season. And I'll say this just quickly with the quarterback situation. Robbie Ashford will help that Auburn football team this year. He's not going to start. He's not ready to be the guy. I don't think he has the wherewithal to go be a starting quarterback in the SEC right now, but he offers something athletically that neither one of those two guys do. And I think you could see him used in multiple ways, but I think at the bottom floor, he will have a package as a quarterback that he forces defenses to prepare for and can give that Auburn offense a little bit of a change up with some quarterback mobility.
He's a guy I am really excited to see. It feels like he could be that X factor in the offense and just add a whole nother level of preparation that defenses will have to account for Auburn. But we have not been bashful about it on this show. We are pro Bryan Harsin. We are pro Auburn. I would love nothing more than for them to rip off 9 wins and just silence all the doubters down there. But moving on to some SEC talk with Cole, obviously you being one of the analysts for the SEC Network. Who are you expecting more from in their first year? Florida's Billy Napier or LSU's Brian Kelly?
Oh, right now I would probably say Brian Kelly. And to be perfectly honest with you, JD, I don't think that has a lot to do with just how good of a coach either one is. Like if we're putting their coaching acumen on a scale, I think it's about even. Now, Brian Kelly's been a head coach longer. I mean, you win 10 games 5 years in a row at Notre Dame. That speaks for itself. So the resume for Brian Kelly would probably lean it towards him just a little bit. But I think LSU has the 3rd most talented roster in the SEC. Now, we've spent a lot of time on our show, on other shows, debating who is the 3rd best team in the SEC. LSU rarely comes up. You get a lot of A&M, you get a lot of Tennessee, you get some Kentucky, you get some Arkansas, a Mississippi State here and there. But not many people are just going to throw LSU out. But if you go over the next 3 years, the guys that are on rosters on Sundays, outside of Alabama and Georgia, I think LSU has the most guys that are going to be drafted and that are going to play in the NFL on this roster right now. Doesn't mean you're going to go win 10 games. So he's got his handful. But I think when you look at what Billy Napier's dealing with, the players who he has on that roster stylistically are going to have trouble matching up with what they want to do. They want to knock you off the ball. They want to be a physical football team. And let's just be real. Dan wasn't building that team that way. That's not what he was trying to construct with his Florida football teams. Now, does he have a couple great guys up front on defense? Brenton Cox and company, Gervon Dexter. I think they have a chance to be solid there, but there's some other question marks on defense. And I do think defensively with Florida, I think Patrick Toney is a star, first and foremost, co-defensive coordinator. He's going to be a name that you hear about in the next few years. Just them being a little bit more responsible on that side of the ball, I think will make them better on that side of the ball. But on offense, Osiris Torrance comes in from Louisiana. He's a big physical guard, but they just don't have a ton of those guys. And that tight end room has been decimated. You had a career-ending injury. You had a couple guys hit the portal. And Billy wants to go a lot of 2, sometimes 3 tight end sets. I just don't know they have the bodies to be able to do that. Now you got a transfer receiver from Arizona State you were leaning on. We don't know what his status is going to be early. And keep in mind, you open up with Utah and Kentucky at home. That might be the most difficult 2-game start of any team in college football this year. So I just don't feel like the personnel aligns itself as much with Billy as it does with Brian going into year 1. And Brian has more talent overall, top to bottom. So I'll lean Brian Kelly year 1 if we're talking about just who does more, maybe who satisfies their fan base more. as far as how they look, what games they win, how many games they win. I'd probably lean LSU a little bit more than Florida this upcoming season.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in the country envies Florida's 2-game opening schedule with Utah coming to the Swamp. We're going to find out about the Gators real early on, Cole. But when it comes to a team that is not short by any stretch of the imagination in the tight end room with the Georgia Bulldogs, the reigning national champions, what are your thoughts on them potentially being able to repeat in 2022?
I think chances are solid. I think chances are good. Let's just start with the fact that you have a quarterback that has won a national championship. I'll wait for anybody to offer me up the other quarterbacks in college football that can say the same. And then you look at the talent up front on both sides of the ball. Okay, you might not be able to hit folks with as many waves of talent and size and ability on that defensive line, but you still bring Jalen Carter back. You still bring Nolan Smith back. You still have Keely Ringo back. Tyke Smith's the guy we all thought was going to play a lot at safety last year. Didn't see as much of him. He'll be ready to roll for that defense. And the scheme, the system's not going to change. You bring in another head coach to run that defense in Will Muschamp, which I think gives them some advantages. I'm not concerned, but I'm interested to see Stacey Searles take over for Matt Luke as the offensive line coach. You lost a couple guys that were playing really good football towards the end of last season. And even though you have experience and talent, I want to see that group mesh. I want to see how they come together, how long that's going to take. But I don't look at that as an area that's going to cost them 2-3 games or a deficiency to the point that could keep them from winning a national championship. Because as you pointed out, JD, you got tight ends just falling off trees over there in Georgia, and the ultimate weapon in college football in Brock Bowers, a guy who can line up as an H, he can line up as a Y, you can split him, motion him, you can move him all around, and what not many tight ends in college football can do, can take very high percentage plays, very short throws, and turn them into explosive plays. So you throw in Darnell Washington at 6'7", 285. They're still going to have – the thing that I liked about Georgia going into last season was I thought physically they were going to have the capability to bludgeon you in a lot of different spots on the field. Offensive line, tight end, defensive line. I mean, hell, even their star position going into last year was Adam Anderson. He was 6'5", 235, 240, playing star. So just nobody physically was going to be able to match up with them. I still think they offer some of that, maybe not quite as much, but some of that going into this year. You got a loaded tailback room. I think the receivers are underrated, just flat underrated. I think they got guys who can play. Now, they might not have a Larry Fitzgerald or a Randy Moss that's going to light college football up, but they're not going to have to with the way that they operate under Coach Monken. So I put Georgia slightly under Ohio State and Alabama as far as teams who I believe can go win a national championship this year. And honestly, after those three, I find it very difficult to convince myself that there are many more, because the difference in those three teams is I think they can get to the playoff and beat one or two teams that are similar to them. When you start talking about A&M or Utah or USC or Miami or even Clemson, I don't know if they can get on that stage and beat Alabama and Ohio State or Georgia and Ohio State 2 consecutive weeks to be able to go win a national championship. I think Georgia has what it takes if they get themselves to that stage to be able to pull that off.
Absolutely no shortage of big, fast humans in Athens. And like you said, that's going to be a key ingredient as they try to repeat. One of the last questions here for you. If there's a team that we're going to be talking about in November, December within the SEC that maybe we're not talking about enough right now, who is that in your mind?
South Carolina. Now, I think we say this every year. I think we just literally flip a coin and say, who has the most treacherous schedule in college football? Is it South Carolina or Arkansas? And honestly, it's Arkansas this year, because you open up with Cincinnati, then South Carolina. And you got a freaking mid-year trip to Provo, Utah, after you play in Starkville the week before, and you play Alabama the week before that. This Arkansas schedule is unbelievable. Mississippi State plays Alabama and Georgia, so they could probably throw theirs into the discussion as well. They go to Arizona and then come back and play LSU. So theirs is tough, but the South Carolina schedule is not very forgiving. But I think if you go back and look at what that team was a year ago, they were almost incapable of the forward pass at times last year. And I'm not trying to really just bang on any individuals, because let's be real. You had a guy who was coaching, not working out, not really throwing, who all of a sudden you toss in as a GA to be your starting quarterback. And then you also had Jason Brown, who is an FCS guy who you tried to put into that spot and make your quarterback. I asked Shane Beamer at Media Days, I said, after the bowl game, how much of you was wishing you would have just put Dakereon Joyner at quarterback and sort of made that thing work? And he said, hey, it's on me. And you're right. I kick myself every morning for it because we probably could have won a few more games if we had done that. But now you insert elite quarterback talent into a group that found ways to move the ball last year. They manufactured some offense. You got Marshawn Lloyd at tailback. If you get a little bit out of the receiver from JMU, along with Josh Vann, who comes back, I think you're okay there. And I think they have the most underrated player in the SEC in Jaheim Bell. This is a kid, kind of like what I talked about with Robbie Ashford at Auburn a little bit earlier, that has legit wheels, and you can line him up at tailback. You can put him at tight end, slot receiver. I think he'll even take some snaps at quarterback this year. He is just the ultimate jumbo athletic Swiss Army knife in that South Carolina offense. And I think the offensive line takes a step. They have to, first and foremost. They can't be as bad as they were last year. Outside the Florida and the North Carolina games, that group just didn't play good football. And it was weird because it was the same cast of characters as the year before. But they went to a lot more pin and pull, a lot more gap scheme stuff. It was a very different system than what they were running the year before. Now, year two, I think they'll be a little bit more acclimated. Jovan Gwynn and those guys, I think, have a little bit of a bounce-back season. Austin Stonger comes in at tight end. I think he fills in nicely for the loss of Nick Muse. Very similar players there. And then defensively, you at least have a solid defensive line. I think that group with Jordan Birch and Bentley and a couple of those guys, they're going to be just fine. They might not have the edge presence that they had a year ago, but I think that defensive line can be a strength of the team. Secondary linebackers, not a strength, but if you get enough up front, that can offset it. And I just give that coaching staff a ton of credit with what Coach Beamer's doing, what he's building. I love the way Satterfield called that offense last year. I think South Carolina is a team sort of similar to Arkansas last year, that we get to the end of October, early November, and we're saying, man, where did this come from? This is not what I expected from this football team.
Going back to what you said about Jaheim Bell, that's just a hilarious sentence in itself. He's a tight end. He might play quarterback. He might play running back, the ultimate Swiss Army knife. But I'm with you. I'm all out of eligibility, Cole. Like, I can't play anymore, but I am ready to commit to Shane Beamer today, and I can get up to Columbia and be in uniform ASAP if he would have me. But, Cole, I'll get you out of here with this. What is your perfect college football Saturday? I know right now for you it's a work day, but let's just say you got the whole schedule clear. You got from 8 a.m. until Hawaii concludes at the end of 2 a.m. or whatever it is. What is your perfect Saturday looking like?
I'm going to tell you what if work was not involved, because I love my job. I love work. I love being with Tom and Jordan. I love calling games, being on the sideline. But if we just kind of took that and pushed it aside and said for this weekend we didn't have to work, my perfect college football Saturday would be to spend the night in Auburn, Alabama, wake up with my wife, who's also an Auburn graduate, my 3 children, Kit, Judge, and Locke, who are 7, 5, and 2, 2 of which have never been to a regular season Auburn football game. They went to the spring game this last year. My daughter has been to a game, but I don't think she remembers it. She was just a baby. Because I don't get to take them to an Auburn football game. It's everybody always says, oh, have your kids been to Auburn yet? They've been to a game? And I'm like, well, I'm working every weekend. I can't take them to games, and my wife can't do it by herself. So I think to be able to go tailgate, walk around campus, take them to Toomer's, and then go to a game, have them experience Tiger Walk, hopefully go roll Toomer's Corner after the game, see the eagle fly, hear the band. Like that to me, watch Albee run around, maybe even get a little football in, try to tell them what's happening there. That would be my perfect Saturday, to just have my entire family in Auburn, Alabama, take in everything that goes with it, and actually have all 3 of my kids and my wife at a game together with me, just because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Well, that sounds absolutely incredible. If y'all have room for one more in that day, I would gladly play babysitter or whatever y'all need me to do to get a part of that dream day at Auburn. But
careful offering up that service with my kids, because it is a difficult task. I'm going to go ahead and warn you right now.
Okay, good to know. Maybe I'll retract that at a later date. But Cole, thank you so much for coming on. Fired up to be able to talk some college football with you and talk about Auburn, everything going on there. Very, very grateful for your time. Folks, if you haven't yet, follow Cole on Twitter. Watch McElroy and Cubelic in the morning and catch him every Saturday with the SEC Network and ESPN working college football Saturday. Cole, thanks again, brother. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.